On a blood-soaked October day in a D-52, at precisely noon, 19,000 condemned men relinquished their weapons and stood anxiously in the water, awaiting Emperor Claudius to honor his promise of mercy. The crimson waves lapped against the gaping holes of burned ships, a haunting reminder of the naval battle they had just survived. Exhausted fighters, criminals, and war prisoners, who had endured hours of brutal combat, found themselves knee-deep in this artificial sea, trapped beneath the shadow of the emperor's box, draped in imperial purple. They had executed the ritual flawlessly, transitioning from the solemnity of honor to the harrowing reality of survival. Marie Terite Salutin, they had proclaimed just hours earlier, a declaration from those about to die. They had engaged in a meticulously choreographed performance, sacrificing themselves for the glory of Rome and the entertainment of the masses. As metal swords clattered into the red-tinged water and shields sank beneath the surface, the men felt they had earned a reprieve from their fates. They stood poised for the promised pardons, their hearts racing with hope. However, the atmosphere shifted abruptly as imperial horns blared across the arena, not the notes of mercy they had longed for, the ominous call to resume the slaughter. A wave of panic surged through the assembled throng. The Praetorian archers stationed at the arena's edge notched their arrows, ready to unleash chaos. What had been promised as a moment of salvation revealed itself as mere theater, just another mindful act in the grim pageant of imperial entertainment. Guards began to unleash their arrows into the mass of men who had once believed they had skated past death's door. There was no shore to swim toward, no escape routes unblocked by the gleaming spears. Only the contemptible allure of their final moments, underscored by betrayal. But how did it come to this? How did the most advanced civilization of its time morph ritual killings into a grotesque form of entertainment? What compelled millions of Romans, including some of the brightest thinkers and esteemed priests, to convince themselves that orchestrating suffering was vital to the stability of social order? To grasp how humanity arrived at this gruesome spectacle, one must rewind 3 centuries back to a modest funeral in which 3 pairs of slaves fought to honor a deceased patriarch, unwittingly planting the seeds for an empire of atrocity. It was 264 BC when Decimus Junius Brutus Scaever orchestrated an unprecedented event of funeral rite that would birth an enduring legacy. His father lay wrapped in sumptuous fabrics upon the funeral pyre, surrounded by lamenting relatives. Decimus had prepared a unique tribute, or what he termed his munus, a sacred duty to the deceased. 6 slaves stood in the cleared space, comrades from the same fields, brandishing swords they had never wielded before, their hands trembling around the cold hilts. "Fight in honor of my father with your blood," Decimus commanded. The mourners shifted uneasily, unsettled by the notion of human sacrifice, traditionally an act confined to barbarians. Yet he insisted this was different. This was sport infused with purpose. The first pair of slaves circled each other, breaths audible against the backdrop of funeral hymns. And when one struck the other, blood spattered onto sacred ground, marking the beginning of something new. The crowd gasped, not in horror, but in a burgeoning fascination for this visceral bloodletting. With 3 men dead and 3 survivors panting from exertion and adrenaline, Decimus nodded with satisfaction. The spirit of his father had been honored. To the crowd's astonishment, he declared that the survivors would be granted freedom. A murmur of approval swept through the mourners. They had gathered to grieve, yet departed with discussions of courage and combat skill, igniting their imaginations. In the months that followed, other noble families adopted this practice. Beginning with 1 pair of fighters and escalating to 2, then 3, all cloaked in the facade of reverence for the dead. Yet it became universally understood they craved the blood. An elderly senator later chronicled, "Yesterday, I attended Quintus' funeral. The gladiatorial contests were unsettling, yet I cannot help but think of them constantly. There was something pure in those desperate struggles." His words spread like wine stains among the Roman elite. The munus transformed. What had once been a solemn duty to the deceased morphed into a communion with violence, cloaked in piety. Within decades, grief metamorphosed into a public spectacle, and the term gained a new meaning that would horrify even its architects. The senator's proclamation echoed through the marble chambers: "Double the gladiators, or lose the election." By 216 BC, less than 50 years after Decimus' funeral, Marcus Aelius Lepidus stood before the Senate, drenched in sweat. He wasn't discussing military strategies or legislative matters. He was negotiating death as a tool for political gain. 20 pairs, Lepidus insisted, while my opponent offers 15. The people demand more. The transformation had been striking. Graveside rituals had morphed into a commodity for political leverage. Blood could buy votes. Ambitious aedile Gaius Scribonius Curio recognized an opportunity in 53 BC to redefine the arena of gladiatorial combat. "I will build something new," he proclaimed to his advisors, sketching a vision of 2 wooden theaters that could spin and meld into one. Grand amphitheater, permanent venue for the spectacle of violence. When Curio announced his vision for public games, the Senate was thrown into a frenzy. "Madness," shouted the elder Cato. "Fighting without sacred purpose, it's sacrilege." But Senator Publius calmly noted, "The people love these contests. Why shouldn't the state provide what they desire? Consider it public welfare." The vote fell unanimously. Rome had united in endorsing a system rooted in barbaric brutality. Within a decade, every elected official understood. Blood offerings were now the currency of political power. Ambitious figures like Julius Caesar would go to immense lengths, borrowing staggering sums to host extravagant displays, 320 pairs of gladiators, and the crowd's whispers of bankruptcy faded behind exclamations of generosity. The tactics for advancement gradually twisted grotesquely. Historians estimated that, to ascend a consulship, one had to orchestrate approximately 100 deaths. This matter was not discussed among the Senate's elite in moral terms, but framed around logistics, the quantities and qualities of weaponry, the procurement of prisoners, and housing arrangements for the gladiators. Marcus Tullius Cicero, the celebrated orator and philosopher, observed the decay. "I attended yesterday's games hosted by the young Pompey. 60 died in 3 hours. The crowd was transported. Fear for what we are becoming." To which a friend responded, "But you attended, didn't you?" Rome had unearthed a sinister truth. The shared experience of bloodshed forged a collective identity. When 50,000 citizens screamed as a gladiator fell, they became indistinguishable, easily manipulated and controlled. Deep within the bowels of Rome's arenas, a new breed of professional labor had emerged, the bestiaires, the animal trainers. They discovered that the wild beasts, in their natural state, lacked sufficient savagery for Roman tastes. To amplify their aggression, meticulous calculations were required. Titus Flavius, a seasoned beastmaster, meticulously recorded. His observations on animal behavior based on hunger levels. A lion required a full 7 days of starvation before it sufficiently posed a threat. Others managed to navigate this dark world as well. Prisoners learned how to survive. Word spread swiftly in the dungeons. "They will spray you with blood before the show. Use animal blood. It will mask your scent. But if you roll in your own excretion first..." The grim lessons of survival were exchanged in whispers among the shackled. As brutal as the system was, it evolved in its heartlessness. A guard, Quintus, penned letters illustrating the irony of their cruel hierarchy. "Today, I saved a man from hanging. Tomorrow, I shall watch him fed to bears." Protocols tightened around the deadliest entertainment, monitoring prisoners round the clock, force feedings, and binding their hands during unsupervised meals. Local authorities considered this a necessary effort to sustain the spectacle. Inexplicably, they worked harder to preserve the lives of condemned men than to feed their own citizens. Rome's fascination with gladiatorial blood sports escalated. The dynamics of entertainment widened. A citizen proposed a chilling strategy. "What if we use criminals' families as leverage?" As expected, the suggestion was rapidly implemented. One philosopher painfully recognized the depth of the depravity as he noted the construction of an arena, built by the hands of 10,000 slaves, believing they were merely excavating a reservoir. Julius Caesar stood at the edge of this massive trench, envisioning an amphitheater far more consequential than any battlefield. As plans unfolded, he envisioned recreating the Battle of Salamis, with prisoners performing as Greek and Persian warriors, each one destined for death. The preparation was painstaking. From discussions with historians to ensure authenticity, to the design of smaller versions of the triremes used in traditional naval warfare. Costume fittings ensued, ensuring those condemned would not only die, but do so dressed in character. When the day of reckoning arrived, 40,000 Romans gathered around the artificial lake that had served as both stage and deathbed. As Caesar watched the waters surge with life, 4,000 condemned men realized their fate. The last remaining crew would earn their survival. The naval battle commenced with ferocity, bodies clashing and screams piercing the air. Desperation spurred frantic struggles as Caesar's vision translated into a gruesome reality. By sunset, only 3 ships remained afloat, with 200 men emerging from the chaos. In a moment steeped in irony, Caesar declared that all who remained would be pardoned. An act met with rapturous approval from the bloodthirsty audience. As the lake was drained that night, revealing the grim reality beneath, Svezia was already stirring plans for further bloodshed. With these violent spectacles, he intuited that he could manipulate public opinion and secure his legacy. What began as solemn rituals transformed into a vast machinery of death, creating not just entertainment, but a testament to an empire's moral decay. Through this twisted history, a dark chapter of humanity unfolded. Extraordinary civilization, founded upon the sadistic consumption of life, forever altering the fabric of society. It was a civilization both remarkable and horrific, a stark reminder of the thin line between honor and atrocity. Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to support our work and never miss an upload. Like this video, drop a comment, and share it with others to show your support and help us grow this historical community.